we want our cake and we want to eat it too, right? We want to be alive. We want to look good. We want to be sharp. We want to be physically able. We don't want to be in pain. We don't want to be sick. We want all those things. And that is where we're now fighting with Mother Nature.
Ben Esra Çavuşoğlu. 18 yıldır ayık bir hayat yaşıyorum. Bağımlılık hastalığıyla mücadelem, beni beden ve zihin performansımı iyileştirmek, hayat kalitemi arttırmak, daha sağlıklı ve uzun yaşamak için yeni yöntemler, cihazlar ve takviye ürünler araştırmaya yönlendirdi. Bağımlılık hastalığı, biohacking ve longevity alanlarındaki kendi deneyimlerimden dünyadaki son gelişmelere, çığır açan girişimcilerden uzman akademisyenlere, yıllardır yaptığım sohbetler artık her hafta Ayık Kafa Podcast'te. Welcome to Ayık Kafa Podcast. Ayık Kafa means sober head. I have Nathalie Niddam today with me. It was very difficult to make an appointment with her, I shall say, because she's so busy. But, it was very important for me to be able to get her understanding in the longevity arena. Nathalie has many specialities. She's an epigenetic coach, holistic nutrition coach. I'm going to say many coaches now. Mm-hmm. She is also a human performance coach. Last but not least, she's an expert in peptides and bioregulators. That is her love, I shall say, because I've been listening to so many podcasts that she's very focused to that. Nathalie, today what I want to learn from you is more about the general understanding, at least your understanding of longevity, biohacking. How do they cross path in between each other? And all these podcasts that I've been listening about you have a different approach. What I mean by that, in a world that are so polarized, one hand, and I don't mind naming names, one hand there is Peter Attia that is almost against everything. And then on the other hand, there is Dave Asprey that is really holding his grounds on certain things that he doesn't want to change his mind. Mm-hmm. And the third, of course, the Bryan Johnson that is also all doing the metric thing. And he's really looking to his biomarkers. What I watched with you that you use more discretion and precaution when you approach to your clients, I would assume. I don't know how you work with your clients, but your podcast gave me the sense of like you're very balanced on your advices. So with that said, my audience would love to know you more so that we can start this lovely conversation.
Thank you, Ezra. You bring up a good point. We're all going to bring our personal sensibility to the table. And Peter Attia is a medical doctor. And so he brings that sensibility to the table. He really is in this space as kind of a guy who has a foot in both worlds, and that makes him a very, very interesting person to listen to. And I have a lot of time for Peter. I mean, I think he does a really nice job. Everybody's not going to agree on everything, and that's okay. I mean, he's coming at it from a very specific point of view. Dave Asprey, yet another point of view. I mean, this is a guy who, ostensibly really cracked open the biohacking space, right? He's the one, he just jumped in with both feet. He went to Tibet or something, had yak tea and decided to turn it into this phenomenon that was the bulletproof coffee, the bulletproof diet, which was really a take on a ketogenic diet. And, he's learned a lot as being in the space, having a podcast, doing the things like he's been a student of human health and optimization for the last, I don't know how long it's been, maybe 20 years that he's been at it, or close to 20 years. He's very much a businessman, right? And so he brings that sensibility to the table. For Bryan Johnson, he's a guy with a lot of money who decided he was going to conduct a big giant science experiment on himself. And he has all the money in the world to throw at it. And he's willing to seemingly put his life on hold and devote every minute of every hour of every day to this one goal, right? And truthfully, that's probably not realistic for most people. And also, we don't know if he's going to be successful, right? We think he's going to be successful. The evidence seems to show that from the things that we can measure, it seems that he's doing a really good job. I don't know that aesthetically, I've not seen him in person, but the pictures I've seen of him kind of looks a little pale to me. He doesn't look like a particularly joyful person, but maybe he's a very happy guy. You just don't get that sense, right? You get the sense that he lives a very, very measured life. And, he just made an announcement recently that he was going to be doing a run of the pineal gland bioregulator, called Epigenetics. And the protocol that he described is actually not the correct protocol for the product that he's using. So it kind of left me scratching my head going, well, wait a minute, you've got all these people around you. How do you get this wrong? And maybe somebody will set him straight. I hope so, because he's going to do this big experiment and then he's going to declare whether it did something or it didn't do something for him. And there's a reasonable chance it's not going to do much, right? Because I think that the point that he's missing, that a lot of people miss with bioregulators, is that the bioregulator is there to normalize. What the bioregulator almost considers normal is kind of like a middle-age state. So, and I'm jumping way ahead here, but, a bioregulator is a very small peptide. It gets into the cell. It upregulates the production of protein. So it helps to rejuvenate whatever organ or gland. It helps to rejuvenate the body from within. And the experiments that showed that this compound was successful at rejuvenating certain people, those experiments were done on elderly people. And they were not done on people who had spent the last, however long Bryan Johnson's been at it, 2 or 3 or however many years. They hadn't spent all of their time trying to make themselves younger in every way possible. So for them, it took them back to being almost like a middle-aged person in certain ways. But for him, he's already there. So the bioregulator is not going to make him be a teenager. Bioregulator is just going to maybe clean things up a little bit in the pineal gland, but it's not going to do much for him. I was surprised and a little bit disappointed, because my impression was that, given that he has no end of resources at his disposal and he's surrounded by doctors and scientists, that maybe they would have done their homework a little bit better.
I listened to a couple of the podcasts that he was a guest, such as Ben Greenfield, and he had a little chuckle when he'd been asked if he's doing infrared saunas or cold plunges, and his response was always, well, my team looked at the studies and there's no evidence, therefore I'm not doing it. I'm agreeing with you, because there's only certain studies that you can follow the protocol with epitalon, such as or other stuff that suddenly he's becoming the study, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that cold plunging does something to help reset the nervous system. Is it necessary for every single person to do that? No, there's many different ways to skin the cat, right? And so my approach is, what can we do to feel our best, to perform our best, to be healthy, and to have a life, right? And recognizing that not everybody is going to want to put all of their energy into this one thing. And so it comes down to goals. It comes down to, how much are you willing to spend? How much time are you willing to give this? Are you wanting to be the person that at 9:00 at night says, oh, it's 9:00, it's time for me to go to bed, because my circadian rhythm says that I should be in bed by 9, which means I had to eat my dinner at 5. And that means that I'm going to get up at 6. And some people want to live their life like that, and that's amazing, but not everybody does. And it's still not established that you must do that to live a long time. There are plenty of people in their 90s walking around who'd never went to bed at 9:00 at night, who didn't get up at 6:00 in the morning, who lived a seemingly normal life. What's defining this current movement is the ever-present, and you would know this better than me, the ever-present human desire to live forever. Nobody wants to die, right? So not only do we not want to die, but we especially don't want to get old, right? Nobody wants to get old. We don't want to get wrinkles. We don't want to not be able to do what we want to do. We want to be able to we want to be able to freeze ourselves pretty much where we are right now, assuming we're somewhere in a good place. and say, okay, this is where I want to stay. I'm good. I don't want to get any older than this. I don't want my face to fall down. I certainly don't want my butt to fall down. I want all the things, right? And so where biohacking and longevity kind of, and longevity is a funny word because I kind of wanted to, when I renamed my podcast, I wanted to be longevity and health span, because I think that medicine can now keep people alive for a really long time, right? What we haven't really solved yet fully is how do we stay alive for all those years? And we want our cake and we want to eat it too, right? We want to be alive. We want to look good. We want to be sharp. We want to be physically able. We don't want to be in pain. We don't want to be sick. We want all those things. And that is where we're now fighting with Mother Nature, because Mother Nature's playbook is very clear, right? Her playbook is you're born, you get to play when you're a child, you enter your reproductive years. Your job now is to make babies. When you're done making your babies, maybe I'll keep you around for a little while to help your babies have their babies, and then we're done. And then you're out. That's not acceptable to us anymore. We don't want that. The biohacking / longevity crowd doesn't want that. And this is why they're doing hormone therapy. Because if you want to look good and be physically fit and all those things into your 80s and your 90s and beyond, you're going to have to maintain your hormones at a certain level so that you don't get the degradation of the bones and the muscle and the brain and all of the systems in the body that naturally happens when all those hormones start to go down.
In my previous episodes, actually, I had a chance to interview different doctors, different MDs about the hormones or addiction, men's health. I had researchers, cancer researcher, stem cell researcher, functional medicine doctor. The thing is that what I find with the medicine, the new medicine, let's say, not the classical or the modern medicine, but the functional medicine, there are certain markers that you can really measure and you can supplement it, or you can give people special regimen to have their optimal health. What confuses me is when it becomes this epigenetics switches, senolytics, all these gadgets, which I have many of them, but, is it how I feel? I don't know. Is there a measurement way that we can measure if these are working or if we're going to be doing it just...
They're starting to be, but it's still new. Like it's new science, right? So you can do a test. There's a company called True Diagnostic. Right? So True Diagnostic says that they can give you an idea of how fast you're aging. So are you aging faster than your biological age? So basically, your birthday is here. Are you aging faster or are you behind the line? Right? And they have a whole bunch of different ways to measure this. They measure telomere length, which is the ends, the tails on the DNA. Our DNA has to duplicate itself over and over and over again. Every time it duplicates itself, it gets a little bit shorter. When it gets too short, it can't duplicate anymore. And essentially, once your DNA can't replicate anymore, you can't live anymore. So, or disease sets in or whatever the case may be. So they measure telomere length. So for example, my telomeres correspond to a person who is 20 years young, or actually more, maybe 25 years younger than me, right? So that's a good sign. But does it mean in absolute terms that we know exactly what that means? Not really. Nobody can say this means that you won't have this, that, or the other thing. Then they will look at 3 main measurements. So one is the telomeres. The second one is your pace of aging. It's based on a big study that was done in Dunedin. I think that's in New Zealand or something, somewhere in that part of the world. And they actually followed people for, I think it was 50, 60 years. Like it was a very large scale study. They can tell your pace of aging. I'm trying to remember how they measure it, but there's some biological measurement that they can measure that tells you if you're aging slower or faster. Again, it's all about pace. So that's really interesting, right? Because you want to be less than 1 on that one. It's not telling you you're 22.3 years older than your age. It's telling you your body seems to be aging at a slower pace than the calendar says. And then finally, the DNA methylation clocks, and these have been studied by a bunch of different researchers, and they keep evolving these clocks, right? So I think at some point this year, if they haven't already done so, they're going to be releasing methylation clocks that correspond to different systems and organs in your body. So they'll be able to say to you, well, you know what? Your heart is aging a little faster, but your brain is aging more slowly. And then that might help people to understand, where should I drive my attention when I'm doing all these different things. So that's them. Then there's another company that does the Aristotle test. And the Aristotle test, it has 12 different sections to the test. And with blood, it measures everything. It measures your vitamins and your minerals, and it measures your genetics and your genetic pathways.
Oh, wow.
It also measures disease risk based on DNA. But the thing I want to say about all these tests is it's still early days.
I discussed that with you because, I've been listening to you and, you know my story. I probably tried most of these tests, not the Aristotle one. When I see that in certain tests there are discrepancies and it's very difficult to really rely on them, let's say.
Exactly. Like they're not absolute. There's no absolute, because if you have your telomeres measured by SpectraCell, and then you have your telomeres measured by True Diagnostic, and then you have your telomeres measured by somebody else, you're going to get 3 different answers, right? Because the science isn't, it isn't fixed on this. People are still figuring it out. It's still young. So what's a person to do?
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to come to that because the thing is that, like for me, up until the age of 34, I was in active addiction. And then after getting into sobriety and then the, understanding through a friend, the functional medicine approaches and trying to heal my brain and my body, I kind of understood, I need to put more effort into make myself as a whole healthy, not just sober, but, thinking better. Physically, I'm stronger. What happened is when I started doing all these tests, biological age test, I was really very surprised that I was older than my chronological age, even though end of this month, I'm going to be 18 years sober, and over a decade, I've been using certain remedies, supplements, and whatnot. I did one gene test, the fitness gene. Over there, because they keep evolving their result.
Well, they all do. They have to. Yeah.
But in that, suddenly I saw this, the gene, whatever gene is that, the aging gene, it was prone to aging. And then I had the active addiction years that is obviously harming my system internally. Being Turkish comes with a lot of stress. So, it makes sense. I understand that I may not be, younger than I am, but, there's nothing else I can do. I mean, I'm kind of trying to do everything.
Well, and it will take time. You didn't get to where you are today in a year or two, right? And we know that one of the biggest factors that accelerates aging is stress. In the Dunedin Pace of Aging study, they identified that early childhood adverse events is one of the factors that accelerates aging in people. Early childhood, like this is when you're tiny little kids. It doesn't mean that over time, if you do the right things, and by doing the right things, I think what we're talking about here is resolving trauma, doing the things that help to settle the nervous system, to balance the nervous system. It's not always about supplements and gadgets. I mean, the gadgets sometimes can help you in the nervous system. Like I know you use Neurovisor. There's things like NuCalm. There's meditation without any gadgets. All of these things we know are very effective. If your nervous system is balanced, that affects every other piece of your physiology. And if you're using all the gadgets on the planet and all the supplements, and you're in a constant state of sympathetic activation, which means you're always in fight, flight, or freeze, so you're always nervous, you're always stressed, at best, it's going to hold steady. We're not going to be able to get the best results from all those I don't know, whatever you want to call them, above the line things until we've done our work. And this is the piece that I think a lot of people miss. If I'm walking around and I'm constantly in a state of stress and agitation and nervousness, it's going to affect my cortisol. And if my cortisol is too high all the time, that means that my body can't build, it's breaking down, right? If my cortisol is very high, my blood sugars are going to be higher, which is going to force my pancreas to work harder. Like there's this whole cascade that comes just from the state of our nervous system. So if I was having a conversation with someone who's never done any of this, would I tell them to run out and get an infrared sauna and a PMF mat and this gadget and that gadget and buy 27 supplements? No, I would start with, what's your day like? Do you sleep? What are you eating? Do you drink? Do you smoke? Like, what is the quality of your life? What is your family and your community life like? Do you have people around you who support you, or do you have people around you who tear you down? Right? And in a way, it's almost more important to establish that foundation before we move on to the next piece.
Wonderful place to come. How do you approach to your clients? I know that you don't take any new clients. I'm in the line. Hopefully you're going to help me to get a healthier life, not younger. Healthy is better than the young.
Yeah.
But how do you approach? What would be the first steps? Then what do you build on?
The testing that I do with my clients is, and like I said to you, as you know, I don't take a lot of clients these days just because I'm too busy with too many things. So I can't give myself, there's not enough of me to give. I can only do so many different things at once. And I feel when I take a client, I feel a real responsibility to be present for them. But, the things I like to look at is I like to look at the microbiome. I like to do a genetic test just to understand. And, your genetics it's not the final answer, right? Because here's the interesting thing about genes. Like you said, you have a gene that accelerates your aging. Maybe it's the clotho gene. I don't know which gene it is. But understand that the human body has a lot of backup systems that we don't even know about, right? In the DNA world, they believe that maybe 2% of your genes are active and 98% of that genetic material is junk. I don't buy that, not even for a second. I don't buy that Mother Nature, there's no junk, right? It might be doing stuff we don't understand. It may be something that we don't always use. But very often I'll see something in a genetic panel that says that this person should be this, that, or the other thing, and they're not. Like look at methylation, for example. A lot of people on their genetic panel are under methylators. Mm-hmm. And the worst thing that can happen is they have a crappy coach that says to them, oh my God, you have a methylation, what's the word they use? You have a methylation, I call it a variant. You have a methylation like dysfunction or whatever the crazy word is that they use. And then this person runs around going, oh my God, I'm an undermethylator. I have a methylation problem. And you know what the crazy thing is? Of the people who on paper are undermethylators, only 20 or 30% of them show up that way, right? So there might be things they need to look out for because it affects their ability to detoxify certain things and process certain nutrients, and they may need a little more support with certain vitamins and things like that. But the body has other systems. It has other backup systems. So it's very important when we're testing to do the test and then to talk to the person. And the best doctors do this, right? The best doctors will do all the tests that they do. And of course, when we're doing blood work, there's some absolute numbers that we want to look at because that's going to give us a very good indication of what's happening in the body that may not have showed up as disease yet, right? The most important thing we can do the most important thing that functional medicine doctors can do for their patients is to get a view of what's building so that they can pull back. I might look at labs, but I need my clients to be working with a functional medicine doctor because I'm not a doctor. Mm-hmm. So I'm not here to fix, to address serious medical issues. I mean, there are people in the space who say, whatever it is, we don't need medicine. We can do it with other stuff. I don't believe that. I believe that you want to take the best of all worlds and bring it together. So we've done a gut microbiome testing. We've done a genetic panel. If this person is really interested in longevity, we will pick one of those diagnostic tests, the true diagnostic or whatever it is, and we'll take a look at it and we'll keep it in perspective, right? It gives us a benchmark. And like I said to you before, the most important thing with those tests is that when you repeat it, you repeat the same test. You can't go jumping from one test to another because you'll make yourself crazy. And then the fourth one that I think is important also is a micronutrient test. So this is something like a SpectraCell test. And what it looks at is the values of different vitamins and minerals and micronutrients at a cellular level. Because if you're very deficient or overrepresented in some of these things, it's going to affect your body's ability to function properly. And I think that one of the things that's important for people to understand is that disease doesn't just show up one day, right? It's not like you become diabetic all of a sudden today. Diabetes has been building for years and years and years and years, but your body has been able to compensate for years and years. Your body is like genius, right? If you don't give it exactly what it needs, it's like, it's okay, we got this. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out another way, right? It's like when you get an injury in your shoulder and one muscle's not working, you have all the other muscles around it are going to compensate. The problem is that over time, you're going to build dysfunction and you're going to end up with an injury. So it's the same systemically with the body. You have a deficiency and the body will compensate until one day it can't anymore. And that's when we become sick. So the value of these micronutrient tests and the value of doing regular blood work is to know, oh, you know what, Ezra, your insulin has been going up and up a little bit every year, a little bit. We need to start taking action in your lifestyle and your diet to lower it. Because otherwise, one day you're going to find yourself staring at type 2 diabetes in the face. So that's kind of what I do with people.
How do you approach to nutrition? Because that's the part, all the rest that you explained, I think it's easier to just look to these, blood work, micronutrient test and whatnot, and, micromanage all these levels. But when it comes to nutrition, that's where I am like very lost, very confused, because, one day I'm like, oh my God, I should only eat red meat. Then the other day, only plant-based. And then I'm Mediterranean. Therefore, here we go, the Mediterranean diet. But also there's how I feel, because, I have not been eating meat too often up until last year. And with menopause, I decided to eat, and that was easier to lose fat for me. And then suddenly I felt great. So if you come to me and you say like, hey, you know what, your microbiota or your microbiome test says that you should not eat red meat, then I'm like, but I feel great and my belly is flat.
Yeah, I think nutrition is entirely personalized. My honest opinion is, well, my opinion, and people know this about me, is I don't think there's one diet for everybody. I just don't. There isn't. And I also feel that you're not going to be able to eat the same way your whole life if you want to keep a certain standard of how you look, right? When we go through menopause as women, we automatically become insulin resistant a little bit, right? Right away. And we stop being able to hold on to muscle and build muscle as well. And frankly, we don't win a prize for building muscle even when we're younger. For most women. Some women have an easier time, but in general, right? Women don't build muscle that easily, or certainly not as easily as men. And so as we're going through menopause, yeah, you know what? We're going to have to lower the carbs a little bit, and we're going to have to increase the protein. And we're going to have to make sure that the fats are healthy. But beyond that, whether you should be ketogenic or I don't see super high carb diets, because if you go very high carb, you have to be very low fat. You can't have carbs and fat. That's like
disaster.
That's physics. that's physics. The bagel with cream cheese is a nightmare. It's a problem. There's no world where it's okay. You can have it once in a while and then go for a big walk or whatever you want to do. But if that's your idea of proper nutrition, you have a problem because you're fighting against the laws of nature. So when it comes to diet, I look at people's genetics. I ask them to give me a food diary so that I can see what they're doing, to see the result that they're getting. And then we start to play with it, right? But at the end of the day, everybody should have the ability to at least fast a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because it was the fasting, then fasting is no longer is showing the result besides losing weight. Then there's the calorie intake restriction, like 25 or so on. What is the best way to approach to that for longevity?
It depends on the person.
Oh, really?
I mean, we know that for longevity, if you overeat, that is not the path to longevity, right? Overweight, obese people typically are not the centenarians. And if we look at the centenarians of today, these are not people that sat around in their 50s obsessing about how long they were going to live.
They just lived.
They just lived, right? They ate what they ate. They had the lifestyle they had. Some of them are smokers. I mean, not usually the centenarians, but there's people in their 90s who are smokers, right? Like, how is that even possible? Like, I don't smoke. How is it possible that this person who smokes is living into their 90s? That doesn't seem fair. But it's not about fair. It's about what's going to work for you, right? And one of the things that really performs every time, certainly in the animal studies, and to some degree, I think in the human studies, is caloric restriction, which means not overeating. It doesn't mean necessarily fasting. The point is that it's easier for most of us to just eat less frequently than it is to restrict our calories, right? Because in a perfect world, when you sit down to a meal, if your hunger goes from 1 to 10, you would stop around 8. Nobody stops at 8. Or very few people. Some people are good at it. Some people say, I've had enough, and they push their plate away. Most people, either they're not paying attention or what they're eating tastes so flippin' good that they're like, I'm going to eat this until it's all gone, and then maybe I'm going to have some more, even though I'm not that hungry, if they're even thinking about how hungry they are. It turns out that fasting or intermittent fasting sometimes, or a little bit, is a really good strategy for helping people to eat less. The bigger question is, where's the window? Should we be skipping breakfast? Should we be skipping dinner? And the answer, which nobody likes, is that the best time to skip a meal is really at night. Right?
After what time?
If you're going to skip one meal, it's better to skip dinner than it is to skip breakfast. And the problem with that is that dinner is when we get together with our family and our friends. And it's social. It's part of the fabric of our lives. You know, like there's Dr. Mercola, love him or hate him. He made a joke once. He said, look, it's easy for me to fast from 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon onwards. I'm single and I have no life. Like, you know, he made a funny joke. It was like, you know, I don't go out. I don't have a partner. I don't have kids. I don't have anybody to have dinner with anyway. So it's just as easy for me not to eat. And I don't know if that's still true. This is going back a few years. But at the end of the day, it's not easy to skip dinner.
It's not, because, you know, we're busy all day long, and at night is the empty time. It's much difficult to fill these hours, like kind of, you know, okay, I don't eat. What do? Watch TV, read a book. It's kind of an
But you read a book, or you sit and talk with people. I mean, it is possible to fill your time in the evening with other things. It's just, is that what's going to work for you, right? If everybody around you is eating dinner and you're not eating dinner, that makes you, kind of puts you out of sync with the rest of your world. And we know that one of the things that's most important for our longevity is community, right? And connection to other people. So the answer at the end is, I encourage my clients, especially women, eat breakfast, have protein with your breakfast. If you must intermittent fast and skip and delay that breakfast, do it maybe 2 or 3 days a week at the most, and never consecutive days, right? For some people, it's going to be easier for them, honestly, to fast from dinner to dinner 1 day a week, right? For them, that's like really easy. They just drink water and green tea all day, the day that they're fasting. they keep busy, they're working, and then they start eating again that night, and life is good.
Do we need to fast, or only calorie restriction, like on the studies, like 25% or 20% with the proper food? Obviously, I'm not talking about the carbs.
Yeah, I think the 25% reduction in calories is just really hard. It's really hard because you have to pay attention, right? It's not enough just to reduce the calories. You have to reduce the calories, and you have to be getting enough protein. You have to be getting enough healthy fats, and you need to be eating the carbs that are complex. You need to be eating the vegetables, especially the vegetables that grow by. It just means you're always thinking about what you're eating, right? The nice thing about leaving out a dinner, and there's even a fasting strategy where somebody will eat a breakfast and then they'll eat a dinner, and they just don't eat in between. But it's understanding, and it's going to go back to the nervous system. It's understanding where this person's nervous system is, because if your adrenals are shot and your thyroid is struggling and you're constantly in this stressed out state, you don't want to be fasting. This is not the time for you to fast, right? Fasting is a tool that we use that once we get to a homeostasis, which is where we're in a balanced state, now the body can deal with a certain amount of stress, because fasting is a stress to the body. Now our body's able to deal with a little bit of stress and get better from it, right? It's like when you go to the gym, you're not going to really get stronger and more fit unless you push yourself. But if you have a crazy injury and you push yourself, you're just going to make your injury worse.
While we were talking, it's the first time actually I'm thinking of this. Back in the day, I had to diet a lot because, I would be gaining weight when I was at the boarding school and whatnot. And, I kind of maybe even messed up with my metabolism. That, baseline metabolism is probably lower than
It's possible. Yeah.
what I really do. Do we need to be worried about that would happen again if we constantly are on a lower calorie than we burn?
That's a good question. So I think the best way to, and this is why it's work, the best way to do it, even if you're doing 25% less calories, you need at least one day a week where you eat more.
Okay.
And one day a week where you eat less. And other days where you eat normal. The thing is that if you're going to chronically restrict your calories all the time, I think that eventually the body, especially when we have a metabolism that's kind of a little bit dysregulated anyway from a lot of yo-yo dieting earlier on, it's possible you get stuck, right? So I think that one of the best plans out there is by a guy by the name of Joel Green. And Joel Green wrote a book called The Immunity Code, and then he wrote another book that just came out called The Way. And the way he calls it is, it's the way he starts with a microbiome reset. So it's a 10-day program. And then he gets people into this world where every day is a little bit different. On one day, you eat different types of starches because the starches are there to feed your microbiome. But because you're eating a little higher carb that day, you're not eating any fat hardly. And you're not eating that much protein. There's some protein, not a lot of fat and carbs. Day 2, you're going to delay your first meal until noon. And then your next meals after that are going to be mostly fat and protein, very little carb. Now, the next day, you might eat a really big breakfast, but we're back to those starches again. So we're cycling through different starches for the day. The day after that, you might delay your first meal. You're back to your fats and your proteins. And so it goes until you have a day on the weekend where you get to eat a lot more, right? And so he has a feasting day. He has intermittent fasting days. He doesn't do a 24-hour fast, but at the end of the week, you've basically nourished your body with a very nutrient-dense diet. So that means, we want to eat things like the vegetables that have lots of colors. We want to eat things like meat and fish and chicken. We want those proteins. We want the healthy fats. He, as a person, is a little less concerned with food quality than a lot of people are. And that's not a bad thing, because you know what? It's not everybody's jam to run around getting organic food. And would it be better? Yes. For someone who can't afford organic food, should they just eat junk? No, you're better off eating food that's not organic, but that's vegetables and meat and chicken and fish, even if it's not, grass fed, the whole 9 yards. It's okay. If you eat a healthy diet, you're going to be fine. And the Mediterranean diet, interestingly enough, will adapt to almost any food plan that you pick. There's a reason why this diet, the Mediterranean diet, keeps coming out on top. And the reason is because by its very nature, when it's applied properly, it's very nutrient dense. And the fats are healthy fats. There's no canola oil in the Mediterranean, in the traditional Mediterranean diet. There's extra virgin olive oil.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now I have the answer. Actually, it's interesting. Without even thinking too much or listening to all these in details, somehow my body takes me where I should go or what I feel like. I never eat sweet potato, probably never. But there's a day suddenly I'm like, I want a starch. I want sweet potato. And then that day I make it more like, in the vegetable, like broccoli, then sweet potato, then whatever. Then the next day I said, okay, I ate enough vegetable with carb loads as well. Then it's going to be all fat and protein day. So I started mix matching these things. And I think that I really feel wonderful. Now I want to come to the workout thing because there's such a big confusion about workouts, like especially in Turkey. Nowadays, obviously, younger people are more into weightlifting. But somehow back in the day, I shall say, people who are weightlifters, meaning like normal people, not like for competition, it would be weird even to say it. Like my mom looks to my arms and then when she sees these popping out veins and she just gets almost disgusted by these looks. She's like, how much more you're going to lift weight? So in Turkey, when you ask someone like, what do you do? It's, I walk. I listen to many podcasts, but I know, and I had a guest actually here, a sports medicine doctor, but they were yet again also very conservative on the food guidance and the workout guidance. What I want to know from you, why weightlifting? For the mitochondrial reason, for the longevity reason, why I want to know, not about like why
for
weightlifting.
The bones. I just had this conversation with one of my guests on my podcast yesterday, and if you don't give your body a reason to keep muscle, it'll ditch muscle. Once your muscle goes away, everything else in your body gets weaker. The bones get weaker. The heart doesn't have to work as hard. The lungs don't have to work as hard. If you want to stay young longer, you want to build muscle. And not like a bodybuilder, not at all. But you want a reasonable amount of lean muscle on your frame that keeps you, upright. If you look, put it this way. If you look at an old person walking down the street, like an elderly person, they're walking like this, right? They're bent over. They're not really picking up their feet. They can't go very far for very long. Those are all signs of being out of shape. People can start working out at any age and they will feel better, they will look better, and they will be able to enjoy their lives more. And weightlifting is the one thing, and you don't have to do it every day. You can weightlift. I weightlift 2 times a week for 30 minutes. I push heavy weights for half an hour, twice a week with a trainer. And that's all the weightlifting I do. Right? Other than that, I do other things. I do sprints, like I have a Carol bike, so I do sprints on my Carol bike. Do I need to have an expensive bike in my basement to do sprints? No. I mean, I could do sprints outside. The Carol bike is a beautiful piece of technology because it uses AI to adapt the resistance to my strength. So it's a gift, but it doesn't mean that I wouldn't be able to go out and do sprints up a hill, for example.
So you prefer sprints than regular steady cardiovascular?
Steady state will break down your muscle.
Oh, that's the reason. Okay.
Yeah. Steady state cardio, look at marathon runners. They don't look like the healthiest people on the planet. And very often, they're not the healthiest people on the planet. They have a lot of autoimmune issues. They have gut issues. They're not carrying a whole lot of muscle. And there's a few exceptions of the few people that are born to do this, but they're not the norm, not even at the competitive level.
Now that we're coming towards the end of our podcast, if you would like to address to my audience who doesn't have these fancy supplements and fancy gadgets, what would be the very important things that they have to apply to their life if they want to be healthy? I'm not even saying like living a long life until 150, but not to die of a unnecessary and unwanted diagnosis.
I would say take care of the basics. The modern life has put us in an artificial world that our bodies isn't adapted to, right? So our modern lives have us exposed to artificial light late into the night. And that's going to dysregulate your circadian clock, and it's going to make it very hard for you to sleep properly. So the glasses that you're wearing are great during the day when you're exposed to artificial light. I should be wearing mine. At night, you want the blue block. If you're going to be in a place where you have a lot of artificial light, or if you're watching TV, then you're going to want to wear those darker glasses just to reduce the amount of blue light that's hitting your retina. This isn't weird. This is, if you think back to how humans lived before there was electricity, they would be sitting around the fire or by candlelight. If you're one of those people, if you've ever gone camping and you went camping without a bunch of artificial lights, which I know people bring with them. So if you go camping and all you have is your firelight, and you will notice, they did a great study on this. They took a bunch of people, they sent them camping, people who said, I don't sleep early. I'm a night owl. I could not sleep early if you paid me. They sent them all camping. Now, nobody had artificial lights. Every one of them within a week was asleep by 9 o'clock, right? Because their circadian clock was able to re-regulate. If your circadian clock is regulated, that's going to be good for your hormones. That's going to be good for your blood sugar, right? Next, we're going to look at food. And I'm going to say to people, if you don't want to worry about it too much, eat more vegetables that grow above the ground than vegetables that grow below the ground. Eat the best quality fish, meat, chicken that you can afford. Eat healthy fats. And by that, I mean, if you like butter and you do well with butter, you can have butter. You can extra virgin olive oil, I think for sure. I mean, the Turkish diet is rich in these things, but try to stay away from like the modern day inventions, like the vegetable oil and the canola oil and the corn oil. Ironically, my grandmother had that stuff in her house because when she came to Canada, that's what was presented to her. But if you go back to Morocco, that's not what she had access to. Eat real food. When you eat, be present and try to be in the company of people who bring you joy, right? Because that community and that connection to people is going to be one of the most important things for your health. Getting outside into nature is another big one, right? Taking a walk outside every day. Ideally, if you take a walk after your meals. And, I know that the Mediterranean tradition is to have a walk after dinner. Now that we have TV, maybe we walk to the TV. But go back to those ways of doing things where you lead like a bit of a slower life. You can still watch your show, but go for a walk first, because that'll do a lot to balance your blood sugar. So we'd have sleep. And then when it comes to exercise, I would say if you can lift heavy stuff a couple of times a week, that would be ideal. If you can challenge your cardiovascular system 3 times a week. So walking every day is amazing. That's movement. But the sprinting piece, like doing a high intensity interval workout 2 or 3 times a week, but keep in your mind that what you want to do is you want to keep your body fit and strong, because that's what's going to get you through all the difficulty in your life. If you have a body that's fit and strong and you're not riddled with pain, you've won the battle, right? And so when you're sitting at the table with your friends and your family, the other thing that I think is really important, aside from eating healthy foods, is be aware of what you're eating, right? Be mindful, chew your food for the love of God. And, don't talk about religion, politics, or any of those things that makes people crazy. Try to keep meal times calm and happy. And I know that's not all. And honestly, coming from a Mediterranean background, that's not always the case. I mean, people are very emotional.
And they eat late, believe me.
And they eat very late. But this is the other thing. Like, the jury's still out. The only thing I will say, though, is if you track your sleep like we do with an Oura ring or whatever it is, you don't sleep as well when you eat late as when you eat early.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But if it's going to make a mess of your family, then maybe eat a lighter meal.
These are great suggestions. It's now the classical question where people can find you. And I strongly suggest they should listen to all of your podcasts, but it's best to hear it from you.
You can find me on Instagram at Nathalie Niddam, just my name. Obviously, there's the podcast, Ezra, that you mentioned, which is Longevity with Nathalie Niddam. That's a new name, new everything. But the podcast is the same. We still talk about all the same things. It's still me. And then there's my website, natniddam.com. And I have a membership community. So right now, to interact with me personally, that's the best place to do it, is a membership group. And if you go on my website, natniddam.com, you'll notice at the top, there's BSP community. And that community, I do live Q&As most weeks. And we're actually doing a program in there, working with people to do a year of bioregulators. We didn't even get to bioregulator peptides today.
We're going to be doing that another episode because it
was too much.
It's too much. And I want to be able to only talk about the peptides and bioregulators another time because
for sure
it should be much more detailed and not like in 5 minutes.
Yeah. So the BSP community, and that's it. That's about it.
I will see you in less than 2 weeks in Dallas.
Oh, you'll be at the Biohacking. Yeah, I'll be there just for Thursday. So let's make sure we meet on Thursday.
I know, but I'm coming to the...
Oh, you're coming to Austin too? Nice. Yeah, so if anybody who's listening is going to be in Austin, I'll be speaking at Hack Your Health on the Sunday.
And also, maybe people from Turkey, it would be easier for them to maybe join. You're also speaking in London.
Yeah, at the Health Optimization Summit. Yeah.
I'm lucky to have a famous speaker with me today. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and looking forward to see you less than 2 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ezra. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.